Okay, Chair, we are now live on YouTube.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Dan. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's Planning and Environmental Protection Committee. I'd like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who are watching the live stream of this meeting via the Council's YouTube page. Due to government guidance on social distancing, this meeting is being held remotely. The decision summary and the minutes of the meeting will be produced in the usual way, and a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the Council's YouTube page. To enable the meeting to run in an orderly manner, I would ask all members of the committee to keep their video camera switched on for the duration of the meeting, but keep your microphone muted, except when I invite you to speak. Officers will join us to introduce their reports in the usual way. If you wish to speak, then please raise your virtual hand, which is the blue hand and is located at the bottom of the participants section. Some of you may have a newer version of Zoom, in which case the raise hand function has moved from the participants section to the reactions section and is now coloured yellow. Whichever version you're using, please ensure you use your raise hand function to indicate that you wish to speak. As with all new arrangements, especially those involving new systems, there is always a risk that we may run into technical problems. For this, I would ask for your patience if this occurs. Should it actually happen, I will declare adjournment while the fault is addressed and the public broadcast will be paused. If it's not possible to address the fault, the meeting may be abandoned until such time as it can be reconvened. I'll begin the meeting by doing a roll call of all members. If you can please confirm your attendance. Councillor Bond.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Brown.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Casey.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Hiller.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Hogg.
Present.
Councillor Hussain. I did see him. I'll carry on for a minute. Councillor Iqbal.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Jones.
Present.
Councillor Rush.
Present.
Councillor Warren.
Present.
Thank you. Back to Councillor Hussain. Can you hear me?
Yes, sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you, Councillor Hussain. And you have myself, Councillor Harper, as Chair. We also have in attendance Sylvia Bland, Head of Planning, and Chris Gordon, Planning Solicitor. Nick Greaves, the Highway Officer, will join us. And of course, we have the members of the Democratic Services team supporting us. Item 1 is apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. We have no apologies for absence.
Thank you very much. Item 2 then is declarations of interest. Can't see any of those. Thank you very much. So there are none. Item 3 is declaration to make representation as a ward councillor. No, none of those as well. Thank you. Item 4 then is development control and enforcement matters. Item 4.1 relates to Lorrock Lodge, 4 Turnpike Road, Hampton Vale. And I'll pass over to Sylvia Bland, please, to introduce the item. Sylvia.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This application is for the change of use of a dwelling house to a Class C2 children's home, and it would accommodate 3 children. It would be located in Turnpike Road at Hampton Vale. On the next slide, you'll see the location of the property within the surrounding area. It is a detached dwelling with a detached garage, and it's situated on a corner plot at the corner of Daisy Drive and Turnpike Road. As I mentioned before, the proposal would be for 3 children, and each of those children would have a full-time carer. That's 1 full-time carer. The facility would also be supported from time to time by other specialists, therapists, and perhaps visitors to the property. If we go to the photographs, you can see the application property straight in front of you, noting that Turnpike Road does have availability for car parking, and it has pavements on both sides. Daisy Grove to the side is a shared surface area. There are also some double yellow lines on Turnpike Road at the boundary with Dukes Avenue. The next slide shows the car parking arrangements at the property. There is a double garage, and in front of that there is a large hard standing which can accommodate up to 4 cars parked in tandem style. There has been a car parking survey done as part of the application, and that demonstrates that at night, over 85% of the street is taken up by car parking, which is a high level and would indicate that there is limited availability for further car parking, particularly in the evenings when people are back at home and have parked their cars up. The next slide shows another view to the rear of the property. You can see it there on the left of the slide. The floor layout plans that you'll see next. This is the ground floor plan, showing a kind of a typical ground floor layout that's similar to a dwelling house, but in this case would include a sensory room at the rear and a staff room and office to the front. The next two slides show the first and the second floor, showing bedroom with ensuite bathroom accommodation. As this accommodation would have 5 bedrooms, there would be a condition attached to any grant of planning permission to restrict the number of occupants to 3 children or 3 full-time carers. And the reason for this is to minimise the parking impact. We do acknowledge, however, that from time to time, particularly during staff changes that take place at 8 AM and 8 PM, there may be more in the number of staff attending the property than at other times. The next slide shows the garage, and the next slide then shows the area of car parking. As we saw from the photograph, that would be to the side of the dwelling, but to the front of the detached garage, and that could accommodate 4 cars parking in tandem, but 3 cars parked side by side, thereby allowing access directly onto the road. Thank you for the slides. In considering the application, as you'll see from the committee report, we have had regard to policy LP8 in the local plan, which supports accommodation for vulnerable people. As I've mentioned, this would be a care home for children, and the Council's Care Commissioner has provided support for this proposal in that there is a need for this type of accommodation. In that respect, the application would comply with that criteria of policy LP8 and other criteria in addition. Turning to the comments of Consultees, we have received an objection from the Council's Highway Authority, as you'll see in the report. The application has also received a large number of objections from local residents. Those are set out in the report, but are also summarised in the update report that you've received. Since that was published, we've received a further 2 letters of objection from local residents. Again, these reiterate the similar issues to those matters that have already been outlined in the main report and the update report, particularly focusing on the matter of highway impact and parking congestion. These most latest objections are to the reconsultation that we've carried out on the reduction of the number of children from 5 to 3 that has recently been proposed by the applicant, and on which this application is to be determined. As the consultation period is not due to expire until the 15th of April, further objections may be received. I'll come on to this matter later. As I mentioned, the main focus of objections has been on the highway impact of the scheme. The Council's car parking standards for this type of use are set out in maximum, and in practice we require 1 space per full-time carer. That would mean a requirement of a maximum of 3 spaces, which could be accommodated at the property, particularly now that the number of children has been reduced. So this is a matter that we have considered very carefully. We believe that a significant amendment has been made, first of all, to reduce the number of children and to reduce the number of full-time carers, both to 3, and that we feel that this could suitably be controlled by way of a planning condition. In addition, we also propose to recommend a temporary consent that would limit the duration of the permission to a 2-year period. And that would enable us to monitor the impact of the proposals on the wider community and the surrounding area. And again, I would stress that the care home is proposed for children only up to the age of 18, and that is also covered by way of a planning condition. Whilst we recognise that at certain times of the day, there may be on-street parking, particularly at times of staff changes, and we recognise that in this area there is a high demand for parking, we'd suggest to members that you also need to consider the fallback position. So this use, currently a dwelling house, could be used as a home where 6 residents could be accommodated and care provided. That would be in the case of adults. This is something that could take place without the requirement for planning permission. Similarly, a change of use from a dwelling house to a small house in multiple occupation, again, could be occupied by up to 6 residents living together as a household without the need for planning permission. And we consider that in looking at the fallback position, there could be a similar or an increased level of car ownership and therefore parking impact on the surrounding area. So in weighing all the objections against the amended proposal for the reduced number of children and carers, we consider that those objections could be overcome by way of the conditions proposed. And therefore we recommend approval subject to there being no substantive new objections received by the end of the consultation period on the 15th of April. And over to you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. Okay, we have 3 people registered to speak. First, could I invite the ward councillor, Marco Celesti, to address committee? Hello, Marco. You have 10 minutes in which to address committee when you're ready. The officer will let you know when you're running out of time.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. That's very kind of you. And I would happily just say a few words, if you don't mind. First of all, I'd like to thank the officers for responding to many of the objections and for making sure that the planning application before us will have a considerably less impact on the area than what would have happened if there'd have been 5 residents instead of 3. Also, I'd also like to say that clearly we all understand the need for providing this kind of accommodation for the children in our city that we are responsible for looking after. However, having said all of that, I don't believe they could have chosen a worse place to choose to put this kind of facility. You know, Hampton, as the ward councillor for Hampton, I can tell you that the single most vociferous and difficult objection that I get from everybody is about parking. It becomes intolerable at times when you can't even get out of your own drive to go out or go and do something, or to go shopping, take the children to school. It becomes seriously impossible in many parts of Hampton, and unfortunately this is one of those places that just doesn't have the space to accommodate even more parking. Now, one of the things that I'm not clear about, and it's not in the report, is, you know, will the occupants of the property also have vehicles? Now, I know we say they're looked after children and what have you, but I believe that is the age of looked after children, is it not up until 25? Anyway, you know, that is something that is not clear, and I find that very difficult. But having said all of that, we read the officer's report, and the local highways authority object to this all the way through. Whilst the applicant says there are 6 parking spaces, there are not 6 useful parking spaces. There are only 3 usable parking spaces, and in my opinion, you can't use those 3 parking spaces without vehicle movements to allow you ingress and egress. So you know, the reality of it is that there are only 2 parking spaces. And of course, when we have a shift changeover, what's already been said, 8 o'clock in the morning and 8 o'clock in the evening, you're going to have vehicles coming in, vehicles coming out. There has to be a handover process. So you can't say, oh, well, we'll just stop 2 seconds and somebody goes and somebody comes. They have to hand over. And that handover may take 20 minutes, half an hour, however long that takes, which means that you've got 6 vehicles on the premises and on the road, rather than what they claim to be 3. I believe that you're only going to get 2 if you're going to move the vehicles about. On the property, you're going to have 2 parking spaces. So actually, you've probably got 4 vehicles on the road, and you know, and this is really, really, really difficult when you consider that the benchmark that our local highways authority uses to decide whether or not there is more availability of on-street parking is 85%, and we're well above the 85%, even according to the applicant's parking survey. So already we're well outside of the sensible limits for allowing people to live in peace and harmony and use their own homes as they would want to. So, you know, I accept all of the things that are said in the report. I understand the fallback position only too well, as we are inundated with HMOs, etc. in Hampton. However, I would urge the committee to consider this application based on the application, not what might happen if it's refused. As far as I'm aware, these people who want to provide a children's home do not build HMOs and do not manage HMOs. So whilst it may be a fallback position, it's only a fallback position if somebody else wants to do it, not the applicant. So I would urge the committee to reconsider the officer's recommendation for approval on the basis that this would completely spoil the amenity of the people living around them. It would make sure, I am certain it would have a huge impact on their ability to get in and out of their own homes at certain times of the day. I cannot imagine anything more frustrating or more difficult than somebody parking across your driveway or 2 cars parked on the road where you cannot get by, because that is exactly what would happen on Turnpike Road if 2 cars park on the road and they don't leave a huge gap between them. You won't get past them. So this is a very serious issue in Turnpike Road, and once again I would urge the committee to refuse it. I'm sorry, Chairman, I'm sorry I've taken up so much of your time, but I think I've made my case. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Celesti. Members, do you have any questions, please, for Councillor? Councillor Hogg.
You made mention about the fallback position not being relevant. Obviously, if this application was turned down, I'm kind of guessing that the agency that currently has this property would look to offload it to because they wouldn't be able to use it as a children's home. So as you rightly say, they are not in the job of running HMOs, but they are in the job of running children homes. And if they don't get the permission, presumably that would then be offloaded to somebody else. And do you not take on board the fact that if it is given to somebody else, that there are various options that would mean that there could quite easily be 6 cars at this premises without any kind of planning permission being necessary?
Sorry, Chair, did you want me to answer that?
It's to you, yes, directed to you, Councillor Celesti.
Yeah, well, I mean, yes, there is always that opportunity. The same as, you know, all the houses on both sides of your home can be turned into HMOs. That's always the case, isn't it? The situation is that we have a house in Turnpike. It's got an application for a children's facility, and we already know that from our local highways authority, they've got a very strong objection to it, and quite frankly, the committee in other circumstances anywhere else in the city would refuse it. We know that, you know that, and I know that. And it's only been recommended for approval, in my opinion, in my opinion, for what it's worth, because the fallback position is that it could be turned into an HMO. Well, we can say that about any house in the city. So I would urge you, the committee, to consider this on its merits, not on whether or not it could be turned into an HMO. We know that can happen anywhere in Peterborough, but that's no reason for approving this particular application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Casey.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Sereste, one of the sticking points here seems to be the changeover time of 8 o'clock, sort of whether or not be 8 o'clock in the morning or 2000 hours in the evening. Do you think, is that a fixed time, or would a more flexible arrangement ameliorate some of the problems?
Well, I can't answer that statistically. All I can say is that if you did have a more flexible time, then clearly you've got less vehicle movements. But if you accept my view that you've only got 2 parking spaces anyway, and you're going to have to move, if you put 3 cars on the site, you're going to have to move them at any time. So it doesn't matter what time the vehicles come, there's always going to be vehicle movements and extra parking on the road. And I repeat, the local highways authorities benchmark is 85%, and the vehicle parking at most times during the week exceeds that.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Chair, I don't know if you want to ask Councillor Rush. I think he's putting his thumbs up instead of raising the hand.
Councillor Rush, yes, your
Yeah,
thumb is going up.
I do keep raising my hand. For some reason, it goes off. I don't know whether somebody's taken it off or not, but it just disappears. Anyway,
Go ahead.
Hello, Marco.
Hi, Councillor.
I visited the site over the weekend and drove from down Turnpike.
Yeah.
A majority of the cars were parked half and half on the footpath and on the road.
Yeah.
If the cars were to park legally on the road, side by side, would emergency vehicles be able to get down the road?
No, you wouldn't get an ordinary car down the road, never mind an emergency vehicle. I mean, that's the point I'm trying to make. It's that tight that you couldn't park. If you parked 2 cars legally opposite each other on the road, I don't think you can get an ordinary car in between.
Thank you very much.
Any further questions for Councillor Celeste? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor. Okay, if I could now invite Mr. Sorry if I don't pronounce this right, Jaya Tilaka. Did I get that right?
That's right. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you.
And
that's right.
I understand Mr. Ali's not going to be joining. Could you have 5 minutes when you're ready to address committee, and that time will start when you start speaking. The Democratic Service Officer will let you know when you're running low on time. Okay, so when you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Harper. Thank you, first of all, committee, for allowing me to speak. I do apologise for my appearance, as COVID has caused my hair to go completely wild. In terms of the planning application, the council has made a lot of the valid points that I was going to make, which is clearly that the biggest issue for us, or there's 2 big issues I feel. One is the adequacy of parking, highway safety. The councillor quite rightly points out, even though the planning office say that you can park 3 cars side by side. I live right next door. I have the same drive. It's a gated drive. You cannot get 3 cars on that drive. The state of parking down the street at the moment is actually very quiet, given COVID. Thank you, Councillor Rush, for actually visiting. And I did note on that weekend that actually with the increase of visitors, now that some of the pandemic restrictions have been released, it was even worse this weekend. 8 o'clock is actually when everybody's at home. People are taking their kids to school. A lot of children you see walking. There is already probably too much traffic on the road due to pit cars going. So that again is a risk to child safety. There's quite a few younger children, but but my teenage son has had incidents where he's nearly been knocked over as well. And that also brings me on to the parking has also led to aggressive encounters due to people parking on the streets and people not being able to get past. People feeling as though they're losing their amenity already, where people are parking directly outside their house, and then they come out and people get annoyed and because they're going down to Duke's Way or down to Daisy Drive, which is already packed as well. We have double yellow lines, and they were put in place after there was a near miss with a waste disposal lorry almost hit the number 29 Duke's Way. So double yellow lines were put in. I think we would ask for more double yellow lines if the road was actually fully adopted, but it's only adopted so far down. Clearly, from the two surveys from the Highways Agency and the other one, and to Councillor Surest's point, there is over occupancy above the 80%, 85%, and actually we are seeing lots of vehicles actually parking on the yellow double lines, and it will just increase if we continue to do that. So whilst highway safety and parking is the main reason, particularly given that your own highway engineers have objected not just to the 5 but to the 3 and reiterated their strong objection, that for me is a material reason why the planning should be refused. The other one I think is, if you actually come down this street, it is a very residential area. There are no other businesses on this street. It's a quiet residential area with young families. Our family, we use our garden regularly to have friends round, or we used to have friends round, and use the peace and quiet. My other half is now sat in the garden, now enjoying the peace and quiet of that garden. Similarly, our neighbour Phil, who lives on Daisy Drive, that backs directly onto that, has the longest boundary. He has 3 young children. And his children, I hear his children kicking the ball around in the back garden, that sort of stuff. They're not noisy, but they are, they're normal children, cheering, crying, all the things that children do. I have experience of friends who've had a
Sorry
child.
to interrupt, Darren, but you have 30 seconds left.
Okay, a child with challenging behaviour, and regular visits from emergency services, police, etc. is common, and excessive aggressive behaviour is common in that nature. So that's my final point.
Okay, thank you. Members, do you have any questions, please? No, looks like you got off easy there. Well done. Okay, thank you very much. If you please mute your mic now. Thank you. Okay, should we go to any questions for officers, please, or legal officer regarding this application? Councillor Hogg.
Yes. So can I ask Nick Groves from Highways just to clarify the situation in terms of the parking? So we've heard Sylvia say that there's either 4 cars parked in tandem or 3 cars across the driveway. We've heard from both Marco and Darren who say that there's only parking for 2 spaces. Although I note that Darren's driveway is maybe slightly narrower than this property from the plans. Can you just give us some clarity on what Highways' position is in terms of the amount of cars that can be parked on the curtilage of the premise?
Yes, and through you, Chair. In terms of the tandem parking, we don't support tandem parking at all on sort of houses like this where there's potential shift changes and working sort of premises. We only really support that on residential units where it can be managed within, say, a family unit. That's a little bit easier to manage. When you have tandem parking on in sort of places like situations like this, you often end up with what we sort of describe as car juggling, where one shift is trying to get out and the other one is trying to get in, or there's issues along those lines, which can create obviously an increase in vehicle movement. We've got a few issues in terms of that over the available road space and the existing capacity, which has already been shown to be in excess of 85%, which means we have obviously concerns, which is why we've objected. In terms of the parking sort of abreast, as it were, I'm not 100% sure that would be able to be achieved, given the sort of space available. But that is just my opinion on that. It wasn't. It's a sort of one thing I wasn't really made aware of. So I didn't know that they put that forward. But looking at it now, it would be tight to enable both staff changes and people to actually use the vehicle. So there may be an increase in vehicle movements as they sort of try to shuffle vehicles out and that.
So what you're saying is that the 3 abreast is probably not workable, but 2 abreast is okay, but you wouldn't support the tandem parking. But surely if they're coming in shifts, so you could use the left hand for the early turn and the right hand for the evening shift, if you get me. So there would be a way of, you say that with a family. My suggestion is that actually with family usage, people are coming and going at different times, and so that it actually becomes more difficult to manage a tandem parking situation. Whereas with a commercial thing where people are coming for a set time, then actually it's probably easier to organise.
Yeah, I see what you mean there. But in the commercial sort of side of things, we think it could cause a few more issues. So we've got in terms of the tandem side of things, it's all about room to manoeuvre, use the vehicles, getting in and out of vehicles, obviously, and it doesn't factor in additional visits either. I mean, we've sort of focused on the number of carers, full-time carers that are required at the premises, but it doesn't factor in Ofsted additional carers that may be provided, managers that are not factored in. So we have concerns over potential additional visits, and there's a distinct lack of available space for visitors locally, let alone at the premises. There's just not capacity within the curtilage of the site to.
But presumably those kind of visits will be during the day, but office hours, when actually the residents are off at work themselves. So the parking capacity of the road is not so bad, presumably.
Yeah, presumably, yes. I suppose that would.
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Iqbal.
Thank you, Chair, and for you. My question is to Nick as well. I'm looking at the report and you state that the care home has the potential to generate a significant level of traffic. Can you just expand on that? Using the word generate a significant level of traffic. Can you just expand what you mean by that? Can you give me some numbers, please? If that's okay.
Through you, Chair. I think what we're referring to there is, as I just said, the additional carers. Obviously, we've got potentially two free shift patterns, and the additional visits from additional requirements from managers, additional carers, and Ofsted specialists, etc. In an area where there's limited road space available as it is, even those increases, the potentially small increases, on paper would still have an effect that is the sort of basis of our objection.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, can I just ask a question? So, do you agree the word you've used, significant, is it appropriate?
Given the level of given the small space available that's been identified in the applicant's own parking survey, I think it may be a bit heavy-handed. I concede. However, it would represent a big impact, I feel, to that area, given the limited space available. There's very little. I think in the parking survey itself, there was only there was no additional capacity really, yeah. I mean, it's just based on that really. It's just there's very little space available, and that couldn't be additionally used. Sorry.
Okay, I'll just ask a question myself now, because it's hot on in my mind. Nick, if you would. So just clarify, I know it's an opinion again, but it's yours as the expert that I'm asking. You mentioned that on the driveway, you would think they would struggle to get 3 side by side. So listening to what Councillor Celestia and the member of the public has said, who addressed us, that would mean 2 on the property, and at shift changeover 4 in the street. Yeah, would that be fair to say? If 2 can only get on the drive, and there's a shift changeover can't be, quite rightly, as Councillor Celestia said, is not a see you wouldn't want to be here type thing as they go past. It's going to be a handover. That could be half an hour. I don't know. An expert could tell me that. But there's going to have to be at some point 6 vehicles parked somewhere during that handover, however long that takes. Now, if, in your opinion, only 2 really could manage it, best 3, we're still talking at least 3 on the road at shift handover, and or possibly 4. Taking out extra visitors, would that be a fair comment?
I think that would be fair. I mean, we've objected from the start against tandem parking. So if they, we've made our objections to that. No, I think that they indicated that there would be a capacity to park those vehicles in tandem, so 2 next to each other, as it were. If they were to look at parking 3 abreast, yeah, there would be obviously a significant vehicle movements during shift changes as well as handover. Like you said, there could be 10-20 minutes as they sorted those vehicles out. Those other vehicles may be need to park locally if there is capacity. So yeah, there could be an increase in vehicles at shift changeover. Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Rush.
Yeah, could you put the slide up, please, where you got 2 cars parked on the driveway?
Is that possible? Can you help us with that, Dan or Sylvia? Thank you. That's it. That was it. You had it then, I think, didn't you?
So that's 2.
That's Gary. Sorry, no, carry on.
Yeah.
There. Is that the
no?
drive?
Next, another one. They've got 2. One. Keep going.
I think it'll be the very last slide, Dan.
No, that's not it. No, I didn't see one with 2 on the drive. That's the one.
No.
I thought there was one there with 2 cars on the driveway.
But that's the drive, isn't it?
Yeah.
See, oh, getting a headache.
That's the drive.
I'm getting a headache.
Yeah, I think the one referring to is the one with the 2 cars in the garage.
Oh, you'll put the ones with the 2 cars in the garage then. Even when you look at that, I cannot see how you're going to get 3 cars side by side without having to get out the roof of the car. So that's what I'm looking at. Thank you very much. That's just a comment I'm making. Thank you.
Fair enough. Thank you, Dan, for that. Okay, Councillor Hogg then, please.
Yeah, just a question for Sylvia, really. It's been mentioned about sort of shift changeovers. You've got sort of 3 cars leaving, 3 cars arriving, some sort of shift handover, and then 3 cars leaving, and then basically having 6 cars on site for some time, for maybe half an hour, what have you. Is it possible to put a condition in whereby, because presumably each of these carers are assigned to a single child, so therefore you could have the shift overs staggered by sort of half an hour before 8, so 7:30, 8 o'clock and 8:30, for instance, and that would then mean that you'd only have an extra car for maybe a little bit long, for obviously for longer, but it would only be 1 extra car in the road. Is that something that we can put down as a condition?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. I think the issue for us is that because we haven't put that question to the applicant, we don't know whether that is something that would be workable for them in the management of the home. They've put the information to us that the shift change would be at 2 certain times, and I can only assume that there are reasons, operational reasons, why they've done that, and they may require to have all the carers available to discuss things that have gone on across the home rather than just in relation to one particular child. I don't know. So I think I would be reluctant to attach such a condition if we didn't really have the assurance from the operator that that would be something that might be reasonable.
But it is possible, is the point.
It would be something that would involve, you know, kind of quite micromanagement of the home, as it were. I'm just thinking about how we might monitor this, you know, to actually enforce that it was taking place.
Well,
you know,
presumably,
we don't really get into that kind of detail to, you know, supervise the comings and goings of staff in such minutiae.
But my point being is that you were recommending that we give them a license for a limited time only, and that over that period of time it could then be, you know, obviously there were issues with parking. Well, then if we'd made the condition that they staggered their shift handovers and they weren't doing so, that would then be a reason to withdraw the license going forward.
You know, again,
if it's not possible, then that's fine. But
yeah.
I'm looking for solutions here, not problems. Is the point? And if it becomes a problem, then clearly that's maybe not something that we should be doing.
But as I've reminded on Mine Committee, as I always do, it's what's before you, and it's not for us to offer the solution. Remember.
Yes, but it is also for us to put in.
That'd be officers' job.
If they are appropriate, and I'm asking, is this something that would be appropriate? Is the point?
Like it though, does it? So, okay. Did I see somebody else hand up? Councillor Jones, did you come on?
You did, Chair, but you covered the point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions to officers or to the legal representation? No. Okay, then we'll move to debate. Who would like to open that for me? Councillor Hiller, welcome.
Yeah, thank you, and welcome to you too, Chair. Seems a long time, doesn't it? Frankly, Chair, I was completely bemused as to where Councillor Hogg was going with this line of questioning. You're absolutely right, of course. It is what it is in front of us this afternoon, and our highways officer, as far as I was concerned, is unequivocal in his objection to the application that is in front of us today. It is not for us to negotiate one way or the other. That's the officer's responsibility with the applicant. And I think, Chair, Councillor Seresti makes a very, very valid point. As a conscientious ward councillor, he rightly cited that the parking facilities in this area are lamentable, absolutely lamentable. And a survey has reported that 12 out of 13 spaces are already occupied. He states, I repeat, any extra traffic would be problematic, and we must agree with him, it would. Our officer's response is, I personally think, is a wee bit disappointing, and they agree that the garage and parking spaces don't meet the current minimum parking standards, but then suggest it could be changed from C3 Resi to C4 HMO without any consent as a fallback. So this application should be allowed for 2 years, presumably to confirm what Councillor Seresti's already told us, and Councillor Howard, of course, has made his comments. All sounds a bit arbitrary to me, Chair. The HMO scenario is indeed true, and we're all painfully aware of that, especially the residents of some of our denser new developments blighted by inappropriate HMO parking issues. But as you, Chair, stated at a recent meeting of this committee, until legislation changes to give local authorities the power to prevent HMOs happening in the wrong place, we're stuck with what we've got currently. It isn't an HMO that's being proposed here today, is it? We can all take a subjective view on whether we think it's appropriate to have a business in this location, but I don't think it is. I think it will exacerbate an existing parking problem, and the purpose of this committee, let's bear that in mind, and residents should have the environmental protection that we're able to give them. I personally will vote for refusing this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rush, please.
Thank you, Chair. As Councillor Chris Harper said, we're always told on this committee that we have to look at what's in front of us. So to keep saying that an HMO could be built, you know, could be this residence could be turned to an HMO, isn't for consideration within this committee. That's my way of thinking. It was beneficial to visit the site and see the problem down the road, what the parking is at the moment. And with more cars at this house, probably people visiting, relations visiting, it's going to make it even worse. So I'll be minded to go against officer's decision, and I would make a recommendation if anybody else doesn't want to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rush. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I think there's a question here. You reap what you sow, and there are conditions on here. I understood where Councillor Hogg was looking at, but it wasn't the places Councillor Hill has said. There are conditions on this. We are short of care facility in the city. The only objection, apart from the very valid complaints and issues raised by the local councillor and residents, and again, I come back to, I'm always mindful when I'm asked to make decisions in other people's wards. But the thing is the care commissioners said we do need this. They have 2 years, as we've done on other applications, to look to see if it does work, and if the people move out and move somewhere else where there is adequate, somebody moves in and turns it into an HMO, because as Councillor Hill has said, that's what we're stuck with, then the situation there would not be monitored and would be a whole lot worse. So I am very much in favour. Again, I do appreciate and understand the residents' concerns, but planning laws being what they are, we have to look at what is in front of us. What Councillor Rush was looking at is 2 cars in the garage. Now, the chances are, if there's 1 car in the garage, I'm not a fan of tandem parking, having lived in houses with it, but if you have 1 car in the garage, 2 cars outside, then you do have parking for 3 cars. And in this particular instance, I am minded to go with the officer's decision so that we don't create any more of a problem that there is, but we do solve a problem in terms of having care facility, additional care facility, much needed care facility in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Anybody else want to enter the debate? Councillor Hogg.
Okay, so I've heard obviously from my colleagues, yes, the garage is only 2 cars wide, but there's obviously there's a pillar in between, and the driveway itself is slightly wider than the garage. I understand Nick's reservations in terms of tandem parking, but I think that actually, in some respects, having a situation where cars are leaving and arriving at a set time, it's far easier to facilitate the use of tandem parking, because you're not trapped in by the car in front of you, because they're both going to be leaving at the same time. So therefore, I would suggest that actually, if the property was to have a different use, like an HMO, very definitely tandem parking is not something that would ever happen, because essentially, people would park in such a way so that the tandem parking couldn't happen, so that their car was trapped in. So, and I think that Councillor Seresti was quite correct. Actually, wherever you live in the city, there is that chance of the house next door to you being turned into an HMO, and it's very definitely something that government need to look at, because I think that, you know, there's an element of, you know, it can happen even where it's not inappropriate. And I think Hampton has suffered more than most. And the reason for that is because you have these large houses in quite squashed up estates. And the people that want to buy a 6-bedroom house for just a single family setting look for houses elsewhere, and that property developers that are looking to put in an HMO, Hampton is the, you know, kind of the best place for them to do so, because the 6-bedroom houses are cheaper than elsewhere in the city. They're nice modern houses, so they're easy to convert for the, you know, sort of the use of an HMO. And I think that if this wasn't approved, there is a very high likelihood of this property being turned into HMO. And as Councillor Jones has said, we do need to have children's homes across the city, because it's, you know, there's definitely a need for them. We don't want to go back to the old days of these sort of large institutions. We want looked after children to be looked after in the communities, and feel that they are, you know, just the same as all the other kids of their age. So from that point of view, I think it is something that needs to be encouraged in terms of the homes. That said, I am, you know, I'm disappointed that there wasn't representation from the applicant here today to answer questions over things like what was going to happen with shift changeovers, what was going to happen with the 2 extra bedrooms that weren't, sorry, 3 extra bedrooms that weren't going to be used. So I find myself very much on the fence on this one, and if it wasn't for the fact, if you know, that the applicant had turned up and was prepared to answer questions on this that would help me go that side of the fence, I'm unfortunately in a position where I'm now looking to go against officer's advice, because I'm not going to get the insurance that I would want in order to approve.
Thank you. Councillor Hiller.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just picking up on what Councillor Jones has said about the care facilities, he cites that care facilities are needed in the city and probably UK-wide. I don't think anybody would disagree with that, Chair. There is a need for children's care facilities, but cites also that we've approved other facilities, therefore maybe that sets a precedent in his own mind. But I would suggest that I don't think from memory we've ever approved anything with such a parking issue as this particular property. You know, let's not forget, members, that, you know, this is a business. It is caring for children, of course it is, and so there is a particular need and demand for this target, but it is a business and they're making profit, and you know, the profit, I assume, is greater if you can buy a bigger house that's cheaper. The fact that it's got parking issues is maybe neither here nor there, because the people who own the property probably don't live there. They have the workers that go in there to look after the children. I'm very uncomfortable in any approval of this proposal that's in front of us at the moment, Chair, and let's not forget it is what it is in front of us at the moment, and this continual reference to it might be an HMO. I mean, we're talking maybes and supposes and what ifs. It's not. It is a children's care facility that we have in front of us, and that's what we have to decide upon, not the maybes and the wherefores and the question marks. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Jones. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can't pretend I'm comfortable with the parking situation. I can't pretend that it is an easy solution. And when we've had things before us, the climbing wall last time, if it'd been the same thing in a different place, it wouldn't have even have come to this committee. And clearly there's a huge focus on the parking, and I feel deeply for the residents, and I understand Councillor Chereste being in support of them as the ward councillor, and fair play, as I would do the same thing in my ward. But the stark reality here is that the conditions that have been put on is, you know, as they were put on other applications, I think there was one in Walton not that long ago, is, you know, and surely it would assuage Councillor Hogg's issues around, if 8 till 8 doesn't work, if you find that there are bottlenecks, then the owners of the business, along with the officers, you'd be able to monitor this, and you'd be able to flex it. As Councillor Iqbal said, is it significant? We just don't know. So the thing is, the danger is that we are saying what might be, what could be, what may be, and the reality is that here there is a way that we can monitor it, and if the fears of councillors and residents come to pass, then there will be a time limit when this can be called to a halt. But at the moment, what I'd be, you know, and I'm sorry that the owner isn't here to answer questions, but I have to go with the officer's recommendations simply because they will monitor it, and we put our trust in their professionalism and guidance. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Just a few things, if I could. Oh, sorry, I've got no. So hand went up and it went down again. Do apologise.
My hand's up, Chair, and I have to say, if Councillor Jones is putting his trust in our officers' expertise and guidance, then why isn't he listening to our highways officer, who is unequivocally against this application? Why? Question mark. Thank you, Chair.
Welcome back, Councillor Jones.
Chair, for exactly the same reason that I'm going with the recommendations of the planning officer. Same thing. There is one, everything else is fine. The only thing that is a fly in the ointment, call it what you will. So exactly the same thing, Councillor Hiller, is the recommendation is to grant. And there is one, the highways, that he's saying is against. That's why. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else before I go?
I have my hand up.
Who's got their hand up?
Councillor Hogg.
Is it in relation to them, because you've had 3 goes already? Go on.
I've had 3 goes. I've only had 1 go in discussion.
Go on, off you go.
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to just clear up a couple of points. So my the reservation of the HMO being, you know, what ifs and what have yous. So it was, you know, part of a large part of the report from the planning officer. So I think, you know, to say that, you know, that it should be completely discounted, I would suggest that if it was such, then Sylvia Brown would not have included that part into a presentation. And you know, as far as you know, what has been said to Councillor Jones about ignoring the advice of officers, you know, time and time again in this committee, we have a situation where there is at least one officer, be it the tree officer or the conservation officer, whose advice is ignored, because ultimately we have to look at the decision in the round. And you know, I just find it incredible that you know, we have to kind of point this out to members that have been in the committee for so long. The other thing I did forget to mention at my initial chat was the fact that the recommendation for 2 years as well was a very big sticking point, because I think that if there is going to be issues with parking and what have you, or any kind of issues with this planning application, that 2 years is far too long to allow for that to come out of the woodwork. And at the very most, I would be recommending just 1 year as a way forward. So again, that's another reason why I will be voting against.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Iqbal.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Yes, if the applicant would have been here, it would have been really good, and we could have asked him some questions and he could have addressed the issues. highway being the only issue, and as I raised that question with the officer when he said that we generate a significant level of traffic, I totally disagree with that. From my personal opinion, I don't think that it will generate significant level of traffic. And basing that as well reason, I am minded to go with the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. These are the things I've picked out of it. So as you know, my feelings that, you know, there's been stated 12 out of 13 spaces are already occupied, so that effectively leaves one at the best. 85% or more are taken at night, and obviously early mornings. And you're talking a shift change over 8 to 8 or 8 and 8 a.m., 8 p.m. So I go back to my point that, let's say, for instance, you could even get 3 cars on this drive side by side. I can't see it myself, but anyway, let's say you could. That still leaves 3 cars that have got to park somewhere while this handover takes place. Now, I know the slight discussion was that could be staggered, but that's not what's in front of us. That's, unfortunately, the applicant hasn't come forward to even talk about that. I understand we need the childcare facilities. We all do. I don't think that's in debate at all. I think we're all there with that one. But highways certainly have got a serious problem with this, and I have a serious problem with it. We've not taken into account really, or in the debate, I haven't heard much about visitors on top. I haven't heard much about specialist visitors, doctors, specialist people who would come along, Ofsted, etc. I haven't heard much about that, who could be there as well. Fallback, heard a lot about that. But any place could be an HMO. It doesn't matter. You know, at the end of the day, we all know the rules on that currently at the moment are your next door neighbour could flog his house tomorrow, and providing it's up to 6, it'll be an HMO if they want it to be. So that is a gimme as far as I'm concerned. I think we know that pretty well. I've spoken about that I think it was the last meeting, to try and get this brought to the forefront, although it's not for this meeting, that there is a problem, and with HMOs we can't look at parking currently, but hopefully we'll deal with that at some point in the future if we can get agreement. We can't prevent that HMO if it happens, although there's no suggestion it will. We can't even prevent a large family of 6 moving in there with 6 cars. Let's be realistic. But we can prevent parking in this case, or this misery, I would call, because that's what I believe we're going to impose on the people. Just listening to the resident spokesperson, and of course the council, who quite rightly took up their case. They think it's going to be a misery, and I have no doubt, listening to the highways officer, that's exactly what's going to happen. And to even give them, and I totally appreciate Council Holt thinking about a year. I think we've talked about that before. Not really being long enough because it only gives us 1 set of seasons. But I couldn't even justify a year with that level of parking. 2 years, well, you know, but I couldn't even justify a year. Not me personally. I just think the where it is, and that's the something we have to look at. We've looked at things like this before. We've looked at parking, antisocial behaviour, things like that before, and we have given. But that's where there's been a reasonable access, and it's just been it's not as big a parking problem, I don't think, as this. This one is huge. We're talking, like I said, potentially 6 cars at any one time in the street, and if we were lucky, 3 to be on that driveway. So 3 have got to go somewhere else, and the officers have said there's only 1 left, 1 space left. So it just doesn't add up. It doesn't add up. You know, it just doesn't add up. I can't really say much more than that. There's too many ifs and buts. I would love to have put this to the applicant and seen if we could have clarified it a little bit, but he's not here to do that, or she's not here to do that. So I'm sorry, I cannot support this in its present state. Thank you. Okay, anybody else? Okay, does anybody put a proposal forward at this stage? Councillor Rush, have your proposal?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The recommendation I'd like to put forward is we go against officer's recommendation. The reason being, going along with the local highway authority, the absence of adequate parking in the area would constitute an highway safety. This is not an appropriate siting for a commercial run business, being there's so little parking capacity remaining within the area, which should be retained for the local residents.
Before we go any further, okay, thank you. Before we go any further, Sylvia, did you get that? Okay. Oh, I lost her.
No, I'm here, Chairman. Yes, thank you. I would say that, you know, I suppose to summarise in planning language, as it were, that there would be insufficient on-site car parking that would lead to an increased level of on-street parking in the surrounding area that would be detrimental to highway safety and residential amenity.
Brian,
Yes,
are you happy with that, Councillor?
I'm happy with that one. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So we now have a valid proposal. Could we have a seconder, please? Councillor Casey, you seconding?
Yes, I'd like to second that, Chair.
Okay, members, we now have a valid proposal. It's been seconded. So I'll now move to the vote. For clarity, I'll ask each member in turn if they are for, against, or abstaining. Councillor Bond.
I'm for.
Councillor Brown.
Against.
Councillor Casey.
For.
Councillor Hiller.
Yes, I'm for the proposal, Chair.
Councillor Hogg.
I'm for the proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Iqbal.
Against.
Councillor Hussain.
Against.
Councillor Jones.
Against.
Councillor Rush.
For.
Councillor Warren.
For.
And myself, Councillor Up, I'm for as well. Dan, for you.
No, I say for. So I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Councillor Brown, could I be for instead of against, please?
Dan, did you get that?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I've got that. So the final total is 8 in favour of the proposal for refusal and 3 against. Therefore, the recommendation is to go against officers' recommendation and refuse the application.
The application is refused. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Those of you who joined us, particularly for that item, you are free to go now whenever you think, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much, committee.
Moving on then, we'll move to item 4.2, which relates to 21 Norman Gate in Ellsworth. And again, back to you, Sylvia, to introduce the item, please.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chairman. This application is for a residential extension, and the reason that it's been brought before you at committee is because the applicant is a senior officer within the council. There have been no objections to the application. So just going through the slides, the application relates to a detached house within a small modern housing estate in Aylesworth. It's located at number 21 Norman Gate. And if we just go through the photographs, you can have a look at the existing site plan and now the proposed site plan, which shows the location of the extension to the rear of the property. There is an existing small single-storey kitchen outrigger, and the proposal is to extend that across the width of the site at ground floor level and then to add a first floor extension. As we go through the slides, we'll see how that looks in a bit more detail. Okay, you can see the location of the house there, 21 Norman Gate. You'll notice that it has accommodation in the roof space, and therefore there are 3 levels of accommodation. And also noting that there are dormer windows there, and it's got a steeply sloping pitch of roof. The next slide shows a close-up view of the house, and the next slide then shows you the rear. I mentioned previously that there was a single-storey outrigger, which you can see there with the cat on the top of it, and it has a hipped roof in contrast to the dual-pitched roof of the main house itself. And with this being the rear elevation, you can see there are 3 Velux windows to the roof. The next slide. This shows a view from the rear garden with the application site to the left, looking towards the blank gable of the property to the west. This is a view of the rear garden area. And the next slide. This shows a view of the application site to the right-hand side, and the neighbouring property at 23 Norman Gate to the other side of the boundary fence. This is a view of the side elevation. Again, you'll see the steeply sloping gable with the single-storey outrigger to the rear. This is the area that the extension will be most readily perceived from the public highway, as this will be a rear extension projecting out from the rear of the building. These show the existing elevations. In particular, to have you look at the bottom left drawing of the existing rear elevation. And the next slide shows the existing plans where, again, you can see the ground floor outrigger. The next slide shows the second floor, and then the next slide. This shows the proposed elevation. So you can see here, looking at the bottom left, the ground floor extension that would extend across the width of the dwelling to provide a dining room, and then the first floor elevation, sorry, the first floor extension, which would comprise about 2/3 of the width of the dwelling, and it would have a hipped roof of a similar style to the existing ground floor outrigger. Here you can see the proposals in plan form. There'll be a dining room created at the ground floor, and then at first floor the extension will comprise a bedroom and bathroom. The second floor plans just simply show you the roofscape of the ground floor and the first floor extensions. Okay, and thank you very much, Chairman. So just really in conclusion, we find this application to be acceptable. It has been amended from when it was first submitted to improve the design and to reduce the width of the first floor extension to be more in keeping with the existing dwelling. There are no objections and it is recommended for approval. Back to you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. We don't have any members of the public or developers, etc., to address us. So we're going to move straight to any questions for officers, if you've got any, please. No, none of those. Okay, to debate then. Anybody wish to debate? Councillor Hiller, for you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. What we've got is an established family home. It's in my ward. I'm very pleased that that it's come before us, but for all the right stroke wrong reasons, in that the only reason it's come before us is because of a personal connection with the council. It's an established home. It's in a pleasant rural development. The owners obviously wish to sympathetically extend their home to provide a better layout for themselves and their family. It's without any detriment to the neighbours' amenity, for the future amenity of the neighbours, I should say. It's officer's recommendation is one of approval, and I completely agree. So I shall be voting for approving the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hogg.
More or less the same. I have to say that it seems that none of the neighbours have been caused to object in any way, and I don't think that we should either. Essentially, as far as I'm concerned, if it wasn't for the association with the council, it would not have come before us, and so therefore I'm more than happy to approve.
Thank you, Councillor Hogg. Yeah, it's a good point made as well, that aspect. So, okay, anybody else? No. So, do we have a proposer? Councillor Casey, are you proposing?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to propose that we approve this application in accordance with officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Hogg, do you wish to second?
I'm happy to second. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much. Okay, then, committee, we have a valid proposal and it's been seconded. So we'll move to the vote. Again, for clarity, I'll ask each member in turn whether you're for, against, or abstaining. Councillor Bond.
For.
Councillor Brown. Councillor Casey.
For.
Councillor Hiller.
Yeah, for, Chair.
Councillor Hogg.
4.
Councillor Iqbal,
4.
Councillor Hussain,
4.
Councillor Jones,
4.
Councillor Rush,
4.
Councillor Warren,
4.
and myself, Councillor Harper, I am 4 as well. So Dan, although I won't ask you to read the result, it's a unanimous decision, so therefore that application is agreed. Okay, it should be the end of the meeting now, but I just want a minute